Hello and welcome to Best for Women Live, the podcast. Joining me today is Hanna Guzman to talk about an amazing conversation that's much needed, I think, which is creating momentum. So Hanna, here we go, plugged in. Hanna is so awesome. She and I have actually had a chance to meet in person earlier at a Canadian Small Business Women event, which was so much fun. Really excited to have her come and share on this topic. As I said, I think it's one that hasn't been getting enough attention, and so really delighted when that's what she proposed. Now, she ought to be, hold on, here we go, request is coming back in again. My friend, is she with us? See if we can go live with her. Is she here? There she is! Perfect.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am excellent. I love that you are in your sound studio. It is such a good place to be. Honestly,
Uh,
when you think about it, it's got all the right noise padding. You've got like a good clear view. Yeah, it's perfect.
yeah, it's a vibe. It's a vibe. I actually sometimes, a lot of the times, everything that I do is in my
Nice.
car. I literally, I don't know, we haven't had a chance to speak, but sometimes I'm driving and I'm like on Zoom calls in my car and I'm like, I'm sorry guys, this is what it is. But you know me, always best face forward, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you. I was actually looking forward to it
Me
for
too.
a few new days now, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Hannah, before we jump into the topic, do you want to take a moment to just introduce yourself to everyone and tell them a little bit about advice from Hannah? Oh, hold on. Instagram looks like it's doing its thing. Every so often it gets confused. So it just said that she can't join even though she's in. So let's see if we can do this one more time. We're going to send her an invitation and hopefully she's going to come back online with us in just a moment. Here we go. It's saying she's joined and she's back. Oh,
And I'm
Instagram.
back. I'm back. I'm back like I never left.
Amazing. Okay, we'll reposition so we can edit for those of you who know there's a replay. So here we go. Hannah, so excited. Let's have you take a moment to introduce yourself briefly and a little bit about the Advice from Hannah podcast.
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Brooke, for having me. Best of Women. Thank you so much for watching the replay. I'm Hanna Guzman. I am the executive producer and host of the podcast show Advice from Hannah. It's available on all streaming platforms. I started this 4 years ago because I used to do Instagram lives like this very often. And my community kept asking me, well, I missed it. Can you do it at this time? Can you do it at that time? You know how this is. And I would be at all types of hours doing IG lives until finally somebody from my community said, why don't you just start a podcast? And here we are, 200 episodes later, and we've been having fun ever since. I've got to interview many people from many walks of life. It's been my own personal development journey as well. I talk about my life and everything that I'm going through, and it's been really nice to see people that I've had, in my season one come back in season three and see how they've kind of like developed and morphed over the years, which has been really, really nice to see. And then here we are today.
Oh, I love it. And thank you for sharing the origin story of why you started a podcast. I mean, it is kind of fun. So those of you watching may know that I had a podcast from, back in 20, I think 17 or 18 and kept it going for quite a while. But then you also sort of reach this point where sometimes the topic morphs or the overall piece morphs into something else. So what was more than good food has morphed into best for women because the topic has become so much more broad than what
Mm-hmm.
it was, right? I started having conversations about sort of those topics that you would talk about comfortably at a kitchen table, but may not talk about outside of that, right? Some of the health things, the way things show up. So it was really focused around health and more than, we called it more than good food because it was more than just, what are you eating today?
Mm-hmm.
But now talking about business development, talking about leadership, talking about stress management encompasses so much more. So today you and I are talking about creating momentum. And I love this because when I actually first started writing it down, I wrote down building momentum. I'm like, no, that's not what she said. She said creating momentum. So I want you to tell me a little bit about what inspired you on this theme.
On creating momentum, you know what? I feel like everybody waits for your career to be at this high level. You have to be at the top of your game. And realistically, I feel like creating momentum is doing small steps every day or bi-weekly or weekly to get you to that momentum. So by the time that you turn around, you're like, oh shoot, I just did 200 episodes and I've been listened in over 30 something countries all over the world. I've spoken for Microsoft, and it's that thing. I created that momentum. I saw a need, like your listeners, whoever who's watching, there's a need. There's something that you can do in this world that only you can do. And once you figure what that is, even if you don't figure it out right away, I started doing IG lives, right? And I really just wanted to be Oprah, literally. And people would ask me what I wanted to do. I'm like, I want to be Oprah. But then as the years kept going, I'm like, well, Oprah's Oprah. I don't want to be Oprah because she's Oprah. I'm Hannah. How can I be Hannah in the best way possible? And it's just creating my own momentum. Brooke, nobody handed me a mic.
Yeah.
Nobody said, Hannah, come speak on stage. I had to create my own stages. I had to create my own show. I had to create a following. I had to build this platform, connect with people, talk to them, have long-winded DM conversations. Not because I'm looking at it for the dollar bill. It's never been about that, but I really want to get to know you. So then when I see you and we meet in person, it's like we've known each other forever. I can give you a prime example of this. I was in a photo shoot for a brand 2 weeks ago, and it was like one of my first photo shoots that I've done. It was a really exciting time for me. And one of the persons behind the lens knew me for over 4 years, and we had never met in person until that moment. And she heard my voice. She's like, "Oh my God, Hannah!" And I said, "Oh, it's me." And it was just instant. We were just I was on, she was behind the lens. It works flawlessly. And I was like, well, there you go. There is the point of this platform. There, I created that momentum with her. I spoke to her. I said, we've just had personal conversations. Really, it was never about business. It is about business at the end of the day. Of course, we all have bills to pay, but it's to me, creating your momentum is getting to know a person well enough to create a moment together in a future date.
Mm.
Not right now. It does. I've been speaking to some people on my platform for 5 years. We haven't been able to collaborate yet, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I've created that momentum with them. So I feel like you have to create your opportunities. You have to create your momentum. You have to build your shops from the bottom up. You have to do it. Nobody's gonna come and be like, here, Brooke, here's a, multi-million dollar business. Here you go. Here's the keys. Go ahead. No,
Yeah. No. And if you do, because that actually does
it
exist,
does.
but
It
it's
does.
not here it is. It's here's the multi-million dollar business, and it's going to cost you this much to buy it. And you get the keys, right? So that does happen. But so we actually have a fabulous question just starting straight off. And I really love this. It's VS Patricia Beauty is asking, and you have almost the same question that I have. I'm going to ask. So I'm going to ask Patricia's first, and then I'm going to double down on mine. So, what is one piece of advice you have for someone who wants to create their own momentum but has trouble finding the courage? And then I'm going to ask my own question that I had sort of, thought about when you and I were talking about the theme for today, which is what happens when you're actually afraid of the momentum.
Ooh,
Yeah.
this is
Okay.
a double.
So
Yeah.
let's start with trouble finding the courage to start creating that momentum. What did you do? How did you just get started? Like what was your impetus, or because you started with IG
Yeah.
lives, right?
Yeah.
So what was that?
Well, you know what? I started it scared,
Mm,
but I felt that the day that I finally have a camera in front of my face that is being viewed by millions of people all over the world, what will I do? So, I had trouble finding the courage, but my vision has always been so much bigger than my courage. So, if I don't do this now, when I start scaling, how will I feel comfortable then? I don't know if this is making sense, but it's making sense to me up here. It's in a sense, if I don't do this now, it's just gonna become so much harder later for me to get in front of a camera and do this because I would be so into my craft that I would think that, oh my God, I've been doing this for 20 years, for example, and I've never had an interview. But you have so much knowledge in you, but you don't even know what to do. So let me start from now when I'm a newbie, when nobody knows me, when I can make all of my mistakes in the world, and they'll just see me grow with me. The audience has grown with me. They've seen the beginning stages. So the courage came from a my vision is bigger than anything else. If you've ever talked to me high level, there's nothing here blocking. In the business world. In other worlds, yes. Business world, no. And secondly, it's who cares? There's so many people that start something, they don't finish it, but I feel like you started it, so that means it's finished. Like you actually did it, and that takes courage just to do it. So if you're thinking about the negative feedback that you're gonna get, whoever's giving you negative feedback, are they doing what you're doing?
Mm.
Are they? So whenever I hear, oh, Hannah, that podcast episode, the noise wasn't great. Oh, well, you said this sentence and it wasn't coherent. Or, hey, you look a little tired in that last video. You may need to put on makeup. Or, hey, you wore that shirt already, but you wore it again. But whenever I hear these things, I say to myself, did you do this? Are you doing this? Not out loud, but in my head. But if it's coming from somebody who's been doing what I've been doing, they wouldn't even say it in that way. They
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't.
they wouldn't because they've stood here. So now for me, whenever an example, I have podcasters that are just starting out in the game, or I have somebody that wants to do video and they're starting out in the game and they ask me like, hey, Hannah, what should I do? I'm like, just start. Start. Doesn't matter if you're doing, a video while you're doing dishes. Just start. And as you get better, you'll be able to flex the muscle. It's a muscle. I have a storytelling muscle, as you do. Like, it's a story I weave, right? But that's taken me 5 years.
Okay, there's so much I want to pick apart in that. So first, I want to thank you, Patricia, for asking the question, because I think it's such an important one. And I love that you started scared. And I love that you just started. You started at a time when you felt you had some expertise, but you didn't feel, and I want to interpret it. And so, guide me if I'm wrong. But I'm also hearing that you started before you had the skill or before you had confidence in your expertise because it was a low risk for you.
Yep.
And I think about to our guest last week, Jennifer Singh, who said, look, you have expertise. And so you have to take the media, this concept of public, off of its pedestal and then just put yourself out there. And it's hard, right? It's that vulnerability of being bold and putting yourself out there. And I also love that you talked about it being a muscle, a skill that you're practicing. And this is one of the feedback so there's two things I want to pick out more of this. It's feedback that I've also had similar to you, where people have come on a journey with me and they say, I was reflecting back on where you started and you've really come a long way, right? It's a skill. In fact, she referred to me as Oprah and I cried. It was beautiful. And then you have this last piece that I want to really pull out because I think it is so deeply valuable, because you talked about this idea of just getting out there, of doing it, but then realizing that people are going to come back and give you what may sound like criticism. And one of the things that I've been finding is I have more and more conversations with women and women who start to be successful, is that people come out of the woodwork to give them advice. And I use the big air quotes because it comes in the weirdest, most bizarre formats. Things like, you shouldn't wear the same outfit. You look tired, you should put on makeup. The sound wasn't really very good. And it's also coming from a lens of they're sharing with you something that they think is going to help make you better because they're starting to see that you're building success. And oftentimes the delivery is terrible.
I mean,
shaking your head, right? Okay, tell me.
listen to me. The only person that should deliver flawlessly, it's my pizza. I don't like, sometimes I sit there, I'm like, man, you could have said this differently, but I understand where you're coming from. At this point, I was talking to my mom yesterday, and I said to her, because I just turned 34 on Saturday, and I told my mom, I'm like, I'm on neutral this year. I'm driving my car on neutral. I'm just a neutral. You're not going to hear the negative. You're not going to hear the positive. I'm just on a neutral right now because I hear so many things out of every corner in my day that I'm just like, I think this is coming from this part of your life right now. So I'm just not going to, I just put you on neutral.
Right, right. And there has to be a belief that if they know you, underpinning that is some form of coming at it from a place of care. It's
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't always feel that way. It doesn't sound that way. It's a helpful lens to cope with the criticism.
Yeah.
We've got another great question, and oh, I love this handle name, the confident and fearless lady. It's beautiful. And so she's asking, do you have any resources? Because she wants to, she's creating her momentum. She wants to create her podcast, and she's a newcomer.
She's a newcomer. So as for resources, I'm working on that. I am
Amazing.
working on I am working on resources. Um, I've started not officially yet, but I'm starting something. So just keep it keep tuned to me.
We're going to keep it in the show notes, and we will be staying close. So for those of you who are signed up for our newsletter, we always make sure we showcase and highlight our guests, and stay with them on their journey. So you'll definitely keep on that. But as you get into that, though, creating a podcast, because the way that this has been worded, creating a podcast as a newcomer, so it's a lens. I'm going to assume that might be the lens of how she's positioning
Mm,
her podcast, but it could also be a place of
yeah.
identity, of confidence around that.
Mm.
So when you first started your podcast, tell us a little bit. Like, did you have tech? Did you have any experience? Was it like you'd started with IG Live, you sort of transitioned into more of an, I'll call it an edited podcast format, as opposed
Yeah.
to sort of the live with people popping in and out, because Instagram sometimes does that
I
to
love
us.
that. I love that about Instagram. I love that about Instagram. What I can tell you is if you're looking to start a podcast, this is what helps me. I imagined who my listener was. So, for example, the Advice from Hannah show, it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes maximum. Very seldomly do I go past 40 minutes, and that is if somebody's very special on there and they want to have the floor and I give them the floor. So think about your ideal listener. Are they a commuter? Are they somebody that likes to binge and listen? Are they somebody that'll just want to hear increments, 10-minute increments, 15-minute increments? Are they a weekly listener, a bi-weekly listener, a monthly listener, a daily listener? So think about who your audience is. So I made selfishly the podcast show for myself because I wanted this show to be something that I wish I heard. So you want to talk about your newcomer experience, which is unique to you. So you have to, it's kind of like, I'm trying to go into for time's sake, go into your head and map out the episodes that you want. So now you have your audience. Now we have the name. Next is how many episodes? A season is typically 12 episodes. So let's say, just for argument's sake and time, we want to do 12 episodes of what? Is it the day I arrived to Canada? Is it when I received my PR? Was it my first job? Is it, and you start taking somebody through a story. I was having a conversation with my younger cousin who was the best man and had a speech at a wedding on Saturday. And I mapped out the speech for him. I said, for every story that you tell, there's a protagonist, there's an antagonist, there is supporting actresses, and there's your villain. Now you kind of see where we are. The villain is the issue that you're trying to talk about. You're the protagonist. Who's listening in your audience? Who are your supporting people on that show? That's kind of where we are with creating it. You just have to start. There's a lot of different platforms online that you can use for free. There's no need to buy all the fancy stuff right off the bat. You can start for free. Even if you like, you can even start doing an IG Live series, which I think is one of the more simplest forms of communication that you have. And then take the audio from here, extract it. Whew, there we go. You got a show, baby. So it's literally you could start it anywhere. Don't I find that when we want to start something, we think high level. When I started the Advice from Hannah show, my very first episode, I imagined a TV set doing that episode. This is where my
Oh,
head
cool.
was at.
That's so cool. So you actually envisioned it at the end of the day as being more video production. You imagine someone sort of sitting in front of their television and watching basically the Hannah show.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. It was that's literally that is my dream is the Hannah show. And I want it. If you look at, I believe it's one of the covers. I think it's season 2. It has show lights all around because I really see it, as silly as it may sound, I really see it as a TV show. Like that would be my ultimate dream for it to be a TV show. Even if it's one season, I'll be happy. But I want the podcast show to be an actual TV show.
We're getting hearts, we're getting happy faces, we're getting lots of support for you on that. And I really appreciate how you sort of planned it out because you're really giving us some of those nuggets of what to think about. And I fell into it. I had an opportunity to interview my favorite cookbook author. And that's how it all started. And then I had this amazing audio recording. I recorded it on like 3 different devices just because I didn't want to lose. So
It
risky. And this
happened.
was right. It has happened. And this was well before any of the tech that we have access to now, right? Like well before the pandemic started and we all switched over and the tech grew with us. So yeah, multiple episodes or multiple recordings, audio only,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was no video at all. And the piece that I was super excited about, and I was like, okay, well, now what do I do with it? And so that was my impetus to start. So different circumstances, right? I did
Yeah.
not pre-plan it, but I do want to ask you because this is something I think is really important when we think about the commitment. So in this case, I do a weekly show
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of extraction of the sound and the video and all these good things. We repost it, reposition it on other platforms. So when you talk about sort of this 12 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
tell me a little bit about time commitment because I personally would not recommend to someone else to start a weekly podcast when they're first. No, I'm seeing your head shake. Okay, tell me a bit more about that.
I'm a bit of this is just me
Mm-hmm.
as a human. I'm very disciplined. And when it comes to myself, I know that when I say I'm going to do something, by the time I've blurted it out loud to somebody in person, this has been well thought out in my head for over a year. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
the commitment has to be there for you to see it through. And podcasting is extremely difficult. I say this often. You're not going to see a viral episode in the first 2 or 3 unless you've already built a platform to a certain level that when you drop an episode, all 200K people that follow you are going to go listen. It may be an afterthought, but if you're just starting out, brand new podcast, I all I wanted was 100 followers on Instagram. That was my goal. Once
Amazing.
I reached 100, I was like, cool, 100
Woo!
people. It's like 100 people. I thought about filling a stadium. This is where my mind was always. I see it. It's always working at something else.
Love it.
So you have to see what season you're in your life first and foremost, and if doing a weekly episode is going to be feasible for you. I don't knock the batching, doing your 12 episodes ahead of time, and then when you have them all ready, boop, 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 you drop them. And it's going to be the most beautiful feeling in the world. And now, after you've done that, then you could say, season is done. We'll be back. You go work more, and then you drop them again. That is, to me personally, the best way. Back when, Brooke, my life wasn't as busy, that is what I would do. Season 1, I was the queen of that. I would sit there and I could tape 4 episodes back to back like this.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I've just saved them. And I'd set a day on my calendar. Today, I'm going to do 6 interviews. Boom, 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 boom. Right? So then we have the 6 interviews, and I would interval in between my solo episodes. So then that's 12 weeks. That's kind of how I built it. Now it's completely different because I'm so busy. And these episodes are done on the fly, typically with myself now at this point. But I feel like I've reached the place where I can do that. But I would see what my schedule is like, what I can commit to, and stick to it. Even if it's a monthly episode, your your listeners, your followers, your listeners will be with you till the end of time. They will be with you always. Your core fans, listeners, family, however you want to call them, they will be with you. I'll tell you an example. When I first launched my very first episode, I launched it at midnight. When I woke up and I looked at the numbers at 6 a.m., which I don't suggest you guys do. When I looked at the numbers, I just don't do that. Just don't. I had 12 listeners. And I can tell you, I know, I was like, bro, girl, 12. We're going to have a pizza party. And, like a party size pizza, anyhow. Because 24 slices, 2 slices each person. Till this day, I can drop an episode, and in the morning, I wake up and I have 12 listeners. They have been with me since the very beginning. And most of the times, my personal life is a disaster, and I will still drop an episode because I think of the 12 people. That is my audience. No matter the other thousands, it's those 12 who
Oh,
I've committed to.
okay. I want to circle back because you opened us with that building relationship, building connection, and really the 12 being the core, but then recognizing that one day you are going to speak at a stadium level and
Mm.
fill that room. And so tell me a little bit about growth and how you've been able to grow the podcast.
The collaborations. That's the number one thing. You collaborate with somebody in an industry or a field that you're curious about. For me, I'm a very curious person. So, for example, if you make tomato paste, I don't know how to make tomato paste. So I want to interview you to find out, how do you make tomato paste? What is your thought process behind it? Why did you start this business? When did you start thinking that it was booming? And the curiosity of, I don't want your trade secrets. It's just the curiosity of how you've done what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when this episode airs, the tomato paste community will listen, right, to your voice, and your listeners will listen to and talk about tomato paste. So now we're together. We're washing, right? We're intertwining with our communities. That is how you grow. You have to collaborate. You just have to. Even if you're not prone to it. Sometimes, listen, sometimes I collaborate and I do an episode and this person doesn't even share me to their mama. Like, I get no shares, and that is fine. That is okay. You have to grow and move forward and pick the right guests that will align with your vision and what your values are, and not have it just be another PR episode for their kid, right? I had to say it in a
No,
nice way.
Hannah,
Yeah,
it's totally. May I share a
yeah.
story that happened even just this morning? So, and I want to use this as a segue in because I know there's another topic you want to dig into, but I think it's really valuable because okay, so we're living what you're talking about. Like we are the example right now, right? You're on Best for Women Live. We're talking about podcasting. So I have a podcast. I'm not here to talk about my podcast. We're here to talk about your expertise, and that's my goal: is to be able to showcase the women and allies in my network and really elevate and give a platform to their expertise. So I got this amazing DM, woman who knows me, and it said, I'm listening to you and the incredible women that you have on your show and how much they're living with confidence. And I'm realizing that I have a project that lights me up and I'm not really living it fully. Can I talk to you about coaching? Right? Because I want to see if you can help me move forward with this. So I'm not the guest, right? I'm here to have conversation, to pick out some amazing gems that you've said and highlight them. But she is seeing exactly what the intention of this is, which is the interaction with women and women who are pushing through their boundaries, right? Growing,
Mm-hmm.
creating momentum, and ultimately, for those in a workplace setting, smashing through this not a myth, glass ceiling,
Yep.
right? Yeah, I see your hands. Yeah, 100%. So, so this leads to I don't monetize my podcast. It's not my ethos. It's not in my business strategy. It's not what I want to do. And yet it has led to me to an opportunity for a discovery call, which is actually my goal. And I'm being really transparent about that for those of you listening. So, Hannah, tell me a little bit more about the monetization piece.
Well, you hit the nail on it because you're somebody who's walked the walk. It's never been about how much money can I make with this episode. It's never been it. It's what room will I be listening to that I couldn't get in there without this show. I'll give you a prime example. So when I spoke with Microsoft Ignite Tour back in the beginning of 2020, January 2020, right before, that episode happened because I was in a room at a networking event and somebody came up to me and said, "Your advice from Hannah, I watched the podcast." She said, "I watched the podcast." And I was like, "You watched the podcast?" She goes, "Yes. You used to do lives and now you listen here." I said, "Well, that's so nice to meet you." She's like, "This is my friend. She works for Microsoft." I said, "Oh, so nice to meet you. How are you? I'm Hannah." We connect on LinkedIn and I see her post, "Oh, I'm looking for women in Toronto to speak about tech." Podcasting is tech because
Yep.
you're using tech to talk about podcasting. And I naturally, being me, I suggest myself because whenever anything is there that says suggest somebody, I always suggest myself. Always. Always. That's my gem, a little nugget for you guys. Because, like I think I'm cool. If there's obviously I'm not going to suggest myself. I'm pretty cool.
You are cool. I'm just going to validate 100%. You are really cool. Yeah.
Pretty
And you
cool.
give good hugs, by the way.
I know.
I know.
I'm a little hug bug.
Yeah.
I'm a little love bug.
So good.
I do. And she instantly DM'd me. "Oh, I remember you were in this room and you
Yeah.
have this podcast show. I want to give you a room. It fits 90 people and anybody in Microsoft would be able to go in there and do their thing. However, it's not a paid room." I said, "That's fine." I go in there, 90 people sign up. From that room, I flipped that room. That's where the money came in because now we're in a room, I have a presentation, and there is different organizations in there that wanted to talk to youth in regard to using their voice. And so voila, this is how we are, right? It's not the initial, everybody thinks about, I want to monetize this. I was watching an interview with Joe Budden, who's like the father of podcasting, and he was talking to Botum, which is Rap Radar, and he asked Joe Budden, "Hey, when did you first see your first $200 directly from podcasting?" And Joe Budden's like, "It took me like 5 years."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Just directly from the show." He goes, "Just directly from the show." He's like, "It took me 5 years." He goes, "Now what I've done with it is completely different because it's your handshake. It's your marketing piece. It's that where you can market yourself for practically really nothing. And you're able to showcase your voice into rooms that you may not be into. Like you made me get into Microsoft. How? I was in a room where I met somebody who then later listened to me and said, "Oh, okay, this girl knows what she's doing." Like yourself in the coaching call. It's never the initial. There's a phrase I always say, not every interaction is a transaction.
Oh, no, nor should it be.
No,
Nor should it be.
it takes
That's
time.
exhausting. That
So
would be exhausting. But it's also not fun. I mean, for me, part of the fun is actually getting to know the people that I get a chance to have a conversation with in a more formal structure, right? You and I
mhm.
have had these conversations. You and I have been on panels before. You and I have been on
Yeah,
Clubhouse together, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, many
we did
times.
Clubhouse.
And
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's actually how we were first
that's how
connected.
we met on
Yeah.
Clubhouse. Yeah.
Audio only, right? Audio only platform. And really interesting to have like good conversations, but in a formal structure, which then translate to the I really had fun talking to you. Let's be friends. Right?
That really was it.
And it was as simple as that.
It was
It
really
was as simple as
that
that.
simple.
Yeah. And now all these years later, we finally actually got to meet in person earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are on a podcast together. So that monetization piece, I think, has a lot of value in what you're saying. Like that, 5 years to get that first $200. But now there's almost an expectation that every podcast has to have a link to some promo, something somewhere where you know that if you buy it, like I don't know, $2 is going to your person. It's that's a strategy. Back to the advice that we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, and the advice that fits, and the advice that really no. There's
Mm-hmm.
some people where that's their path, but for other
That's cool.
people, it's not the right path.
It's not, and it shouldn't be forced upon you. A lot of times lately when I reject a collaboration or I say, you know what, I honestly, I don't have the space in my schedule to commit to that. However, I can support you in another way. I can buy a ticket. I can forward you over a contact that may be better suited for this role, for this, and I turned corporate, and it's just one of those things. It's just my nature. But we don't have to do everything. We don't have to be great at everything. I think the only time on my podcast, obviously, when if I have a client on the show and they're promoting like a gala or something along the lines of that, or a new product is launching, product launch, book launch, okay, cool. There's a portion of it that I say, hey, when does this, like for a book, for example, I think like authors, like your book is out and
Yeah,
it's out forever in the world.
yeah,
So it's one of those things that it makes sense. It has to make sense for you. It has to align for you because I don't want it 10 years down the road, right? This is year 5 of me in business. I don't want year 10 and you guys thinking, oh my God, Hannah basically almost sold her dog online, at one point because she was, I've never sold a dog, but because what aligns with your brand? Is it for me? Is it women led? Is it, it most of the time, most of the things I do, they're teams of women. Does it align with my heart? And third of all, in 4 or 5 years, will I regret being on that stage? I don't have to be on every stage. I don't
yeah.
have to. I,
And I
yeah.
want to circle back to two things because I love that. And I'll just quickly end off. So, for those of you who are starting with a podcast, it can be really helpful to have some setting expectations. So, I would have sent you an email about a week ago saying, hey, I need a
Mm-hmm.
headshot. And I, want to confirm that this is a theme. This is physically how we're going to do it. And I also included in there my personal boundary. I don't promote things on the podcast, so we're not going to talk about it, but I'm happy to put it in the show notes. I'm happy to put it in my newsletter, which I have, right? Because you do have an event coming up, which we're not going to talk about right now. I'm pure
Yeah.
principle, and you haven't, and I appreciate it.
No.
And so these are, but certainly everybody tune in because it's going to be in the show notes. And this is what's I think really valuable is that also you're, as a guest, you honor sort of what those boundaries look like.
Yeah, it's your house.
Yeah,
It's your house. I'm walking, I always say, like, welcome home. This is your house. This is your space. So these are your I honestly, I even like that. I was like, oh, this is a good idea. Hannah, maybe like I was sitting there, I'm like, shoot, and I respect it. As as a fellow podcaster, I'm sitting here, I was like, oh, I really think that's so cool that you're like, nah, bro, this is what it is. I'm like, all right, cool, let's go.
right,
What are we talking about? What are we talking? And it keeps it relevant as well. It keeps it relevant as well, and it keeps you timeless. I always like to say that I want to have timeless conversations, which is super helpful because you can listen 5 years from now and you're like, okay, yeah, she was still talking about podcasting. Yeah, she's still talking about not being on every stage and not collaborating with everybody if it doesn't align with you. Like she's still, it's you say the same thing over and over again because that's who you are. But if I sat here and I'm like, my face the whole time, you'd be like, oh my God, Hannah, what's going on? There's other things to talk about.
yeah.
There are.
And I want to circle back to the purpose because we started out at the very beginning talking about the fact that, we're creating momentum.
Hmm.
And for you, the purpose was greater than the fear. And then you gave a beautiful example of the Microsoft stage. And then the people in that room wanted to hear you come or have you come and talk to youth about using their voice,
Hmm.
right? You talked about focusing on women led businesses. So this idea of what is your purpose and how is this podcast serving that purpose is part of
Yeah,
that too. Yeah.
most definitely. If you look at my interviews, who I've interviewed in the past, I could probably say that 90% have been females. Very few males have made it on my show. And if they have, they're like tycoons. They're multiple business owners. Somebody that we can actually learn from that that bring value. But it's mostly women. It's mostly women. It's mostly marginalized women. That's who I want to speak with because I find that it's harder. It's it's harder when you're a woman to get your voice heard. It's even harder when you look a certain way. I feel like there's just different levels of hard. There's different levels of hard, and you see this, and I see this on a daily basis, and it hurts. It really does hurt when I see it because I'm like, wow, I really wish that, the way you came out, or the way that you went to talk about this product was better amplified. I wish that it was in a much better setting. I wish that it would have, like, I want to do so much and I can't because then I'm bossy, right? So and people have to do what you have to do, but it's just something that I see it so much, and I see it in the corporate world even more. I see it a lot in the corporate. I'm in the corporate world, and I see it so much. I've seen, just recently, I've seen like my male counterpart surpass a female in my work office that has years more of experience
Mm,
and titles coming left, right, and center, and he gets just up here.
that
And
that ceiling genuinely exists. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
100%,
yeah.
100%. And I just love that you're creating platform, you're creating space, opening doors, creating a room, virtual room where people are attending with their eyes and their ears.
Mm.
My friend, I can't believe we're at time. This has flown by. It has been so amazing. Do you have any final words for our listeners?
You know what? I want to thank you for creating this space. I really think that this is a vibe, as I call it. Like, this is such a, it was gonna come out, right? It's a vibe. Brooke, this is a vibe. This is something you need to do all the time. I want to come back. Like, when can I come back? But
We'll have that conversation for sure. Don't you worry.
let me know when I can come back. I think this is a good time, but you're doing it as well. You're creating the space that you want to see online. And it's just create what you want to see. Don't don't sit there and think that it's just gonna fall on your lap. Maybe it will, but you have to do the work on the inside of yourself to showcase that on the outside. If you're not confident with yourself, how will somebody believe in your product, person, place, thing that you are trying to move out into the world, right? And there's people like you that can help you get from 0 to 100, or 50 to 100, or 90 to 100. So that's what it is. Just keep showing up in the rooms that you feel. I was in a room yesterday, Brooke, that I was just like, oh my God, oh my God. Like, I felt like the bottom feeder in that room yesterday. I was like, oh. But I still showed up, right? I still showed up. I still went.
And brought value because you brought perspective, right? Your voice brought a different perspective likely in that room that needed to be said.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. It was a good
Yeah.
time. It was a good time.
Amazing. Hannah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you for the listeners. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week.